The skies once again, a bit more cloud coming into the west of Scotland, a few showers here, but away from that cloud, under the clear skies, again, one or two fog patches, but for most it's a bright, if rather chilly start to Thursday. The sun soon warms things up again though, and for Thursday, countrywide, it's looking like another spectacular day. Northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland perhaps seeing a bit more cloud at times through Thursday, Friday and into Saturday. But for the rest of the country, sunshine prevails.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to Brazier, some fast-paced news for you today from 4 until 6. And coming up in the next hour, police officers who run away from trouble are too nervous to talk to victims and reluctant to work antisocial hours. I'll discuss an extraordinary report which details the seemingly breathtaking uselessness of a growing number of trainee police officers. Also, did Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe show a little bit of ingratitude to the taxpayers who stumped up £400 million for her release by criticising the British government? We have both sides of that debate. And what happened when a British woman left her home in Wiltshire to heckle a swimmer in America for not really, as it was described, being a woman? Alongside me throughout the next 2 hours, the commentator Scarlett Maguire. But first, we have the latest news headlines for you now.
Good afternoon, it's 4:01. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Poland is pushing for Russia's exclusion from the G20. The country says it's received a positive response to the suggestion, and the request will now go to the US president. In Ukraine, the foreign ministry says 300,000 people trapped in the occupied city of Kherson are running out of food and medical supplies. The country's also pleading with Russia to let citizens leave Mariupol. The Deputy Prime Minister claims Russian forces are blocking humanitarian corridors and preventing supplies from reaching the city. Addressing the Italian Parliament via video link, President Volodymyr Zelensky urged Western countries to increase sanctions against Moscow.
Support more sanctions against Russia. Support a full embargo on trade, starting with oil. Support a ban against Russian ships arriving to your ports, so they get to pay the price for their aggression and the mining of the sea. there should be no exceptions of the sanctions for any Russian bank.
President Zelensky. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is calling for an end to what he's described as an absurd war, saying the conflict is going nowhere fast.
This war is unwinnable. Sooner or later, it will have to move from the battlefield to the peace table, and that is inevitable. The only question is how many more lives must be lost, how many more bombs must fall, how many Mariupols must be destroyed, how many more Ukrainians and Russians will be killed before everyone realizes that this war has no winners, only losers.
The United Nations Secretary-General. Jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has been sentenced to 9 years in a maximum security prison after being convicted in Russia of large-scale fraud. Navalny is one of President Putin's most prominent critics. He's already serving a 2.5-year sentence for parole violations related to charges that he says are fabricated. Boris Johnson's spokesperson has accused Vladimir Putin of using trumped-up charges against those seeking to hold him to account. The jury in the murder trial of Sir David Amess has been shown CCTV footage of the terror suspect's journey to the MP's constituency. Ali Harbi Ali can be seen walking with a long coat and black backpack as he made the trek from his home in North London to Leigh-on-Sea in Essex in October last year. The court previously heard that he'd spent years researching a number of potential high-profile political targets, including Michael Gove, Dominic Raab and Sir Keir Starmer. He's denied preparing terrorist attacks and murder. In other news, a 22-year-old man has appeared in court charged with murdering Sabita Thanwani. The 19-year-old died at student accommodation in Clerkenwell in central London in the early hours of Saturday morning. Tunisian national Maher Marouf, of no fixed address, has also been accused of attacking a police officer. He's been remanded in custody until Thursday. Neighbours of a 17-month-old girl who died after a dog attack at her home have spoken of their shock. Residents in the Blackbrook area of St Helens have described Bella Ray Birch as a beautiful little girl. The dog had only been with the family a week. It's since been put down. Merseyside police are appealing for witnesses and anyone who has any information on the dog.
Ray has lost her life in the most unimaginably terrible circumstances. Detailed investigations are continuing into this tragic event. Forensic examinations to determine the dog's breed are ongoing, and we are working to identify all the previous owners of the dog so we can establish its history.
Police Superintendent Steve Brizzle. The number of COVID patients in Scotland's hospitals has reached a record high for the second day in a row. Official figures show 2,221 people are currently in hospital with the virus. 12,000 new cases and 37 deaths are also reported. It comes as other parts of the UK experience a surge in cases, with Wales and England seeing a sharp increase. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Brazier.
Coming up on 6 minutes past 4, very good afternoon to you. And we start with news from Ukraine. Pope Francis should directly mediate to secure peace in Ukraine. That's a proposal that came from President Zelensky today. He was speaking to Italian MPs. Meanwhile, on the battlefields, there is growing concern for the fates of 300,000 Ukrainians. That's the number estimated to be trapped inside the port city, that poor, beleaguered port city of Mariupol, without adequate supplies of food, water and medicines. Let's turn to the former British Military Commander General Sir Richard Marrons for some perspectives on Ukraine today. General, thank you so much for your time. Shall we start with Mariupol? It's impossible to know with absolute certainty what conditions are like there. We can assume they're really pretty grim.
Yes, we can, and we should recognise the strategic significance of Mariupol in two dimensions. The first is the Russians have to take Mariupol to complete the land bridge between Russia and Crimea. That's always been one of their main strategic objectives of this terrible war. And the second thing that's important, in the way they've had to reduce Mariupol, they failed to take it with light forces, they failed to take it with heavier forces. So they have simply basically shelled it into rubble and eventual submission. And that is very likely to be the tactic that they conclude they're going to apply to other Ukrainian cities like Kherson that you just mentioned.
General, journalists get very excited about new technology and new missiles that fly very quickly. But actually, I just wonder to what extent that when you look at the reduction of Mariupol and you see some of the other cities that are invested by the Russian army, it's old-fashioned artillery, heavy ordnance that seems to be actually causing most of the damage.
Yeah, so it's a combination of about 1,100 long-range precision missiles. They typically carry 400 to 500 kilograms of explosive, and they've been the weapon used for some of the major attacks on infrastructure. The Russian Air Force is unlike many Western air forces in that it primarily acts like an artillery arm, and it doesn't have a huge stock of precision bombs, nor pilots that are particularly skilled at precision bombing. So the Russian Air Force has been a factor. But by far, by a huge distance, the biggest killer in this war is ground-based artillery from artillery guns and tank guns. And those are the things that are going to cause most of the destruction ahead.
How easy is it, General, for the Russian forces to pacify the areas they do conquer? Or is it the case that they're given the fact that the front lines are pretty porous and there'll be Ukrainian soldiers behind them, that actually if you are a Russian infantryman sleeping at night in, close by your tank or wherever you are, is never going to be an easy night's sleep because even the ground you've taken isn't really secure?
So the Russians have got two major challenges. One is they're obviously in Ukraine and they know where the front line is. They'll tend to focus on that. But their lines of communication, the roads that all the stuff has to come down from Belarus and Russia are long, 100 to 200 miles long. And every foot of that is vulnerable to a Ukrainian attack from the flank into the convoys that sustain them with fuel, food, ammunition, and reinforcements. And the second thing, and frankly more significant, is the Russians were assuming that they were going to sweep into Ukraine and be welcomed by a very large number of Ukrainians, and they would therefore, in as much as they needed to, conduct an occupation by consent. And what they found is the total resilience and opposition of the great majority of Ukrainian people, and they are only able now to contemplate an occupation by sheer force, and they do not have the forces to do that everywhere. And what we are beginning to see is how Russia will calibrate an occupation by force, because the key decision for them is how much do they tolerate a civil population that is viscerally opposed to their presence, and how much do they try to control them by sheer violence, either by moving them or killing them at levels that will look like ethnic cleansing and genocide if they take it to the extreme they have done in other places. There is no way this occupation can succeed without the consent of the Ukrainian people, and they're never going to get the consent of the Ukrainian people.
General Sir Richard Barons, really appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks very much indeed. Scarlett Maguire alongside me throughout the next 2 hours. Scarlett, just a broad point about the appetite for this story. I was looking at a couple of news websites before I came into the studio just to see how Ukraine as a story was still prominent or otherwise. Inevitably, it slips down the running orders, doesn't it, a little bit? At what point does British public interest grow fatigued with this, do you think?
I think that journalists, to keep them busy, occupied, fascinated, have to keep on changing the story,
yeah.
which is what journalists do. And so one is the refugees, one is the bravery of people. But the next one actually is going back to your question about how do the Russians keep control, because we all assume that in the end the Russians will take control. But this is going to be a guerrilla warfare that goes on for decades. I mean, one cannot understand how, given how they got it so wrong, what they really want to do apart from destroy a country.
I mean, it feels like a bit of media navel gazing, but it's important, isn't it? Because, we want to keep this story in the public eye. Arguably, the public will want it kept in the public eye longer than the journalists are able to keep furnishing them with new lines. I wonder about this. I mean, I've read lots of military history. I've been, covered wars over the years and all the rest of it. I'm au fait with, I'm militarily literate. And time was not so many decades ago in this country when a lot of the UK population was too. National service, or dad served in the army during World War II, whatever it is. I think we've moved beyond that now, haven't we? I'm not sure how much people really get the sort of stuff that General Sir Richard was just talking about.
No, I think most people don't. I think most people, what's really important to the pictures is the pictures of just awfulness of the bombings, and you think, how could I possibly live there? And in a way, it's about the personal stories, isn't it? That's it more than ammunition.
And those images of just shattered communities.
Yes.
Scarlett, for now, we'll come back to you in a second, but we're going to talk about this story now, and it starts with the question, how is the government's plan to recruit more bobbies onto the beat getting on? There's a survey of officers who train new recruits, and it's painted a truly damning picture of a new and, to be frank, pretty hopeless cohort of trainee officers. Listen to the words of this particular supervisor. We are supporting student officers who can't pass the fitness test, get anxious talking to the public, can't speak to people on the telephone, literally run away from any physical violence, usually leaving their tutor at risk, and even one who knocked on the door to speak to a victim but then ran away before it was answered, leaving his tutor scratching his head. In some forces, a fifth of those who start training now never qualify. Huge waste of taxpayers' money. The research by the Police Federation includes accounts of parents calling senior officers to ask for their trainee police officer children to be given the day off for their birthday. Joining me now, a former senior officer who has previously expressed strong doubts about the ability of new police recruits to do the job we expect them to, and that is Kevin Hurley, who joins us now, as you see. Kevin Hurley, thanks for joining us. What do you make of this report?
Well, I know it myself. The bottom line here is you get what you pay for, and you also get whatever the HR people or the recruitment planners decide to do. So we've got a situation now where police basic starting pay in real terms is about £7,000 below what it was 7 or 8 years ago. That makes it much less attractive. Combine that with the fact that everyone who comes in now has to do part-time study whilst doing their duties to finish degrees off as part of, frankly, some nonsensical idea developed by the organisation called the College of Policing to professionalise the police. Other basic stuff that's come in, along with the desire, quite rightly, to make our police more emotionally intelligent, if you like, more thoughtful about conflict resolution, is they've taken away some of the real basic things that happened in recruit training. In fact, they've taken away recruit training as we know it. You don't now go for 16 weeks full-time at a training centre. More important, you're not closely supervised by regular serving trainers to see if you've got what it takes in mock-up incidents. So these questions of do people run away or not, or how do they manage conflict, are tested and weeded at an earlier stage. Also, senior officers like myself who've been around for a bit are not involved in the initial interview. I mean, I used to run interviews on the basis of thinking, can this person stand at Lewisham Clock Tower or outside the Hammersmith Palais at 11 o'clock at night when mayhem breaks out and everyone starts fighting drunkenly? Will they keep their nerve? Can they manage a situation till the help comes? Basic tests of what you have to do as a cop on the street. If you can't get a sense for that, I know you need from your gut reaction almost to work out what you've got in front of you. Never mind all the assessment centres. By chatting to someone, ask them about where they come from, their background. Have you played a bit of rugby? Have you been in the army? Did you play netball at school? Male or female? What have you done? You can get an idea of how much inner steel they've got to do the job. But on top of that, in recruit training, you used to compulsorily have to go in the boxing ring with one of your fellow candidates for a session, and you also had to go in the wrestling ring with one. And the rationale behind it was quite simple. A lot of people have joined the police or do join the police, and they've never had a punch in the face or never been bounced on the floor. One thing I can actually guarantee you, is that if you join the police, you will get punched in the face, you will get slapped round the head, and you will be knocked to the floor a number of times in your career. In fact, it is the only job...
Do you think that's where we come to the absolute nub of it? Do you think that's really where we come to the nub of it? Because I'm totally in agreement with you.
Yes.
An old pal of mine who became a police officer and actually became a successful one, in his first 2 years said, you'll get filled in 2 or 3 times. That's a sort of going rate. And I just wonder now, in today's workplace, whether that is a compact that a lot of people feel is acceptable. I think you and I, many of our viewers, know that the world doesn't really change. And if we want our police to protect us, they're going to have to get grappling down and dirty. That's what's required to keep people safe. But I'm just not sure we're producing the skill sets that are required to do that job always.
Well, Colin, you're absolutely right. I don't think we are. Yes, let's get people to think about how they make their decisions, conflict resolution. But the bottom line on it is, if you are not able to grapple, to fight, to take a punch, get stuck in support of your colleagues, and frankly don't understand, if you get knocked to the floor and don't get back up again fast and get stuck in, you'll get battered. You can't actually do the police work, and what these uniformed officers are doing, we see in front of us. A lot of the stuff, yes, is walking around, chatting to people, trying to resolve stuff verbally and in discussions. But there comes a time when you face that violent, large 16-year-old child who may carry a weapon, where you're going to have to get stuck in, or the 49-year-old drunken wife beater who you have to wrestle on the 8th floor of some apartment block. There's no way around it. You're going to have to get stuck in. I can tell you, even in my career, it was not... I had colleagues run away or back off from me, but I think now, because they're not being sorted for that, they don't actually get involved in grappling and be punched in a wrestling ring or boxing ring. A lot of people join and they don't understand that's what's going to happen. And if you don't stand up and fight back, you're either going to get hurt or that bad person will get away.
Kevin, we've got to leave it there. We're out of time. What a shame. It's a really important conversation. We'll continue it some other time. Kevin Hurley, thanks very much. I think somebody's left their phone here. It's Scarlett Maguire. There we go. We'll have more from Scarlett soon. As soon as she's turned her phone off, there she looks guilty. Now, a teenage girl killed after the e-scooter she was riding collided with a van has been described by a friend as a rainbow of colour and fun. Eyewitnesses said the 14-year-old girl was riding an e-scooter when she was hit by a minivan. This was 1:30 yesterday afternoon. It's a tragedy that's once again put a question mark over the safety of e-scooters. Let's turn to Michael Quintana, the head of policy communications at personal transport company Ridables, who we've talked to before. And Michael, it's always important to make the point that I'm sure you're about to make, which is, for a lot of people, e-scooters are a really fantastic solution to the problems of getting around a big, crowded city space. But this is the youngest fatality. Regulation remains a real headache for government and others.
Yeah, that's the case. You know, right now we're looking at a device, a product, whatever you want to call it, that is, you know, the usage of it, you know, the viability of it, you know, is right in front of us to see. But obviously, there's a lot of old legacy laws and, you know, and some protocols we need to get through in order to formally legalize it. Now, it's really, you know, nobody wants to see anybody get hurt or anything worse, you know, have a fatality like this 14-year-old. And it's a real shame. You know, our organization is a think tank, you know, and we are promoting the safe, legalized, conducting of these vehicles. We're also looking at, you know, we're open to things like, you know, obviously making sure there's checks in place, making sure that people are of age, making sure that there's even, you know, the possibility of insurance, you know, and things on hand. We have a policy on our website, a framework that we've put together over the years, which factors in everything from, you know, the UK as a location, you know, what the roads are like here, factors in what other countries have done in order to, you know, some of the teething problems they've gone through. You know, we're really looking at trying to find the best way to approach this.
Yeah, we all want to do that. Michael, look, point blank, I had somebody in the studio with me yesterday when this story first broke, and we tried to talk about it then. And the point that was made to me yesterday afternoon was, here's a 14-year-old suddenly capable of doing 30 miles an hour on one of these tiny e-scooters. And even on a bicycle, there'd be more protection, there'd be more visibility, and there wouldn't be as much speed. You know, point blank, prima facie, an e-scooter is more dangerous when it's being ridden irresponsibly. And there's no getting away from that.
I don't fully agree. It is dangerous, like anything's dangerous. You know, well, like a lot of things are dangerous. But one of the arguments that we have in place is you are upright, so you have a bit more visibility. You do have the ability to bail off the device if that were the case. Also, the other thing is, in general, most of the devices are up to 12 to 15 miles per hour. The average one that you're seeing. I know there's talk of high-powered ones, and those are out there as well. But your average device is 12 to 15. Which is about the same, if not a bit less, than a than a push bike. Now, what we're looking at is obviously it's a new device, a new category. We're trying to find ways to to make them as safe as possible. And when you have private ownership, one of the things you are more likely to have is things like a helmet. Obviously, ride maybe a bit more carefully because you own the device. Whereas when you rent it, when it's on the hire scheme, much like how people are with renting a car, sometimes you might push the limits. Now, should a 14-year-old be on an e-scooter? Not in its current form, no. We are up for still the license check, the potential of being able to take out insurance, having all forms of accountability, staying off of pavements, all these kind of things.
Okay.
So it's something now.
Michael, got to leave it there, but appreciate your thoughts as ever. Michael Quintana there. Coming up very shortly after the break, going to be speaking with the British activist who travelled to America, there to protest at a swimming gala which saw the trans athlete Leah Thomas win the women's competition. You may have seen it, it's been much covered. But first we'll have a look at the weather for you.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Smashing afternoon out there for most of us, and it's going to stay that way until at least the end of the weekend. Blue skies, feeling warm. Odd shower possible, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Generally speaking, high pressure to the east of the UK is maintaining a warm and dry feed of air from the continent, and as a result, virtually cloud-free skies. Not entirely as we go through the evening. Some medium-level cloud drifts north. That could give the odd shower for North Wales, North Midlands, Northern England, for example. Either way, it disappears by the end of the night, and under extensive clear skies, a few fog patches start to form into northeast England, eastern England as well. Temperatures dipping away as well, I think a few degrees above freezing for towns and cities, perhaps just dipping below in some sheltered spots. So chill in the air first thing tomorrow, but plenty of blue skies and sunshine, even where we've got the fog first thing. That disappears very quickly. And then for the vast majority, another dry day. Just the chance of a shower there for the far north of Scotland as temperatures rise, perhaps for eastern England as well, and widely from the north of Scotland to the south of England, we're looking at 15 to 18, perhaps 19 Celsius. A bit breezier for the likes of Cornwall, a bit more cloud here as well through the day, but for most through Thursday early hours, it's clear skies once again. A bit more cloud coming into the west of Scotland, a few showers here, but away from that cloud, under the clear skies, again, one or two fog patches, but for most it's a bright, if rather chilly start to Thursday. The sun soon warms things up again though, and for Thursday, countrywide, it's looking like another spectacular day. Northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland perhaps seeing a bit more cloud at times through Thursday, Friday and into Saturday. But for the rest of the country, sunshine prevails.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, the next word starts with a quotation mark, which you can't see. So, quotation mark. I am firmly behind protecting women's sports. We cannot have biological boys competing against women. It's bad for the trans community. Close quotation marks. Those are the words, well, they're not the words of a right-wing commentator or a so-called transphobe. They are the words of the most famous transgender person in the world, Caitlyn Jenner. Has the world finally woken up and realised that ideologically attempting to erase biology has some consequences, including wiping out or damaging the fairness of women's sport? Well, my next guest felt so strongly about this question that she travelled to the United States in recent days to protest there against the participation of Leah Thomas in the swimming championships in Atlanta. Here she is at that competition.
Shame! Shame on the NCAA!
Thank you, Zaghari.
He's a man!
He's a man. She also debated the topic of transgender athletes with a bystander in a video which has subsequently gone viral and has had 1.4 million views on Twitter, asking him if he thought Leah Thomas's body was the same as the other women in the pool.
Are you saying you think that his body is the same as the other girls in the pool?
Everybody is
different. No. Are you saying he doesn't have male organs?
So do you think that,
Are you saying he doesn't have male organs?
I don't think that I think you're twisting words, and I think you have no idea. Oh, actually, let me ask you.
Does he have, no, I'm a woman, that is not a woman.
Can I ask you a question?
That is not a woman.
Well, Kelly J. Keane joins me now. Welcome to you, back from your travels. Sometimes, well, you decided to go and deal with this on the spot, face to face with people, rather than sort of hurling grenades from the Twitter sphere. Did that strategy work, do you think?
Oh my goodness, yes it did. First of all, I've been banned from Twitter for saying women don't have male appendages since 2018, so a bit tricky for me to try and launch grenades from there. I think it's really important in an environment like that. I actually went to America to talk in New York about this issue, about women's rights. I also talked outside the White House and protested outside the UN because they really do not care for women. But specifically looking at the Leah Thomas issue, I was in a room with hundreds of people who all knew that there was a man in the race with their daughters and with the girls in the pool. And everybody wanted to say it, and everyone is far too frightened to say it. So I really did feel it was my emperor's new clothes moment, and that it really did need to be said that he is in fact a man.
I wonder if we're going to look back, Kelly J. Keane, at this story, at Leah Thomas, and look back at it as a seminal moment. Scarlett Maguire's my studio guest today, and we were talking during the commercial break about that picture, and I know for rights reasons I'm not sure we can use it, but people will have seen it. That picture, there's not that picture, but the picture of Leah Thomas standing alone.
3 girls standing together and him.
Exactly. And, you know, this is a complicated argument for people who don't follow every tick and comma. But actually, the image of the girls standing apart, smaller than Leah Thomas as well, but cleaving together, it just told its own story.
I mean, look, I don't think it is a complicated issue. I really don't. We've known since the dawn of time what is a man and what is a woman, and yet we now have to pretend that we don't know. We know who we want around our children in female-only spaces. We know who we want to invite into women's sports and who should be competing in women's sports. And it simply isn't a man. It's what's beautiful about this particular issue, this particular Leah Thomas, is that he is about 6'4", and he may well be just as much a victim as anyone else in this, because it is the NCAA, it's the Olympics, it's all of these supposed grown-ups that have made these catastrophically stupid recommendations that invite men into women's sports. And so I think it's absolutely vital that we just say, right, enough is enough now. It's gone a little bit too far. And in fact, it went too far quite some time ago. And let's get all grown-ups back in the room, talk common sense, and to allow women and girls the dignity and privacy of having their own spaces just for them.
Kelly J. Keane, as always, fascinating talking to you. Really appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. Scarlett Maguire is with me in the studio today for the next hour and a half or thereabouts. Was listening to that. The way Kelly J. Keane explains it, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. You don't see it that way.
No. I think sport is really difficult, because I think that obviously the reason there are women and men's sports is absolutely physical. I mean, that men's bodies are different, that they're stronger, that the testosterone is more. And in a way, I mean, the more interesting case is the one of Casta Samoli, who is intergender. I mean, there's no point in saying that everybody is either male or female. I mean, she was a case in point where actually it was on the margins and it was discussed. And I mean, I think there should be a serious debate about women's sports. But to call Leah a man, I mean, I just think is deeply offensive. And to say there are women and men and that's it, is that actually there are a lot of people, I mean, a tiny minority, but you know, thousands, hundreds of thousands, who feel unhappy in their body and they change. And these are vulnerable people who have a terrible time. And actually to then start saying, oh, you're not really a woman. I mean, what's interesting, of course, is it doesn't happen the other way round. I mean, the women who become men just go quiet. I mean, I think this might say things about men and women, that you have the vociferous people men who've transitioned into women, but also you have women. I'm a feminist, absolutely straight down the line. I do not feel offended by them. What I think is we need to have a proper debate rather than throw things around. That's what I feel.
It's a good rule for life, I think, that, isn't it, Scarlett? Thanks very much indeed. And after the break, with time for another debate, we're going to be asking, is Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe right to criticise the government? First, we'll bring you up to date with the latest news headlines today.
Thanks, Colin. It's 4:35. I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's foreign ministry says 300,000 people trapped in the occupied city of Kherson are now running out of food and medical supplies. The country's also pleading with Russia to let citizens leave Mariupol. The Deputy Prime Minister claims Russian forces are blocking humanitarian corridors and preventing supplies from reaching the city. Jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has been sentenced to 9 years in a maximum security prison in Russia for large-scale fraud. Navalny is one of President Putin's most prominent critics. He's already serving a 2.5-year sentence for parole violations relating to charges that he says are fabricated. The court in the murder trial of Sir David Amess has been told the accused threatened to kill 4 more people after attacking the MP. The jury was also shown CCTV footage of Ali Harbi Ali's journey to Sir David's constituency in Essex in October last year. The defendant has denied preparing terrorist acts and murder. A 22-year-old man has appeared in court charged with murdering Sabita Thanwani. The 19-year-old died at student accommodation in Clerkenwell in central London in the early hours of Saturday morning. Tunisian national Maher Marouf, of no fixed address, has also been accused of attacking a police officer. He's been remanded in custody until Thursday. And the number of COVID patients in Scotland's hospitals has reached a record high for the second day in a row. Official figures show that 2,221 people are currently in hospital with the virus. Almost 12,000 new cases and 37 deaths are also reported. It comes as other parts of the UK see a surge in cases. Well, on TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Brazier will be back in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It is coming up to 20 to 5. Well, the nation was touched indeed by the reuniting of Richard and Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. Yesterday, the couple gave a press conference in which they talked about what life had been like since Mrs. Zaghari-Ratcliffe was held in a prison in Iran for, what was it, five years in the end. That press conference made that pretty clear. But she also said, didn't she, and she disagreed with her husband Richard at one point when she said, actually, there were 5, when he said that the authorities didn't handle the whole thing really well, she disagreed and said, well, we had 5 foreign secretaries in 6 years. Suddenly on Twitter, the word ungrateful was trending. And there are those who say, look, if you're going to criticise anybody, make sure you start by criticising the Iranian regime. They were the ones ultimately responsible for holding Mrs. Zaghari-Ratcliffe. Let's debate this then. Alan Mendoza is with the Henry Jackson Society. Scarlett Maguire is with me here in the studio. Alan, we'll start with you because I think you take the view that actually she has. I'll choose my words carefully because she's been through a hideous ordeal, but you feel there's a whiff of ingratitude here.
I wouldn't say ingratitude, that's probably the wrong word to use here. As you've mentioned, she's gone through an ordeal. And frankly, anyone who's been imprisoned wrongly for 6 years and, with the kind of tactics that we used against her in prison has the right to come to whatever conclusion they would like. But the main problem is that the situation doesn't stack up when it comes to the facts of the case. The case basically resolves around the Iranian authorities having wrongly imprisoned her, wrongly treated her for 6 years, used her as a bargaining tool for their own nefarious purposes, and the British government appears to be getting the blame. Now, again, without wanting to look at her own circumstances and comment on that, the reality is that there's only one sort of figure to blame here, and that is the Iranian regime rather than the British government.
Scarlett Maguire, just on the point, I know we read this slightly differently, but when she said, 5 foreign secretaries in 6 years, I thought that was a criticism of a situation where the government wasn't able to present a coherent negotiating strategy. You get one foreign secretary, they decide what they're going to do about Zaghari-Ratcliffe, and then they're out of office and replaced by a new foreign secretary. And when I look at that, I think, well, that's just how democracies work. And to criticise that is almost on one level to criticise the democratic processes that give us elected cabinets. And Iran doesn't have that because it's a dictatorship.
I don't think she meant that at all. I mean, what she meant was that it shouldn't have taken 5 foreign secretaries to get her out. It should have taken her 1. And, I mean, we must remember that the man who is now Prime Minister, when he was Foreign Secretary, actually made a terrible gaffe by saying that she was working out there when the whole point was that she was on holiday, and actually made things worse for her. I mean, she doesn't owe this country gratitude. We had a duty to get her out. We owed Iran £400 million. We'd owed Iran that for decades. An international court found that we owed that money, and we still refused to give it to them. When some Iranians came over here to try and negotiate, they were arrested at Heathrow. So the Iranian government, who are pretty bloody appalling, can I say, but the Iranian government decided that there was only one way to do it. I mean, it was terrible. She was a pawn, but she was a pawn between 2 governments. And I think she had an absolute right to say, they should have got me out faster.
Alan Mendoza, as Scarlett Maguire presents it, it's very transactional. We owed the money, we paid the money, she was freed. It was that simple.
Well, it's not quite that simple, because otherwise the government would have paid the money right at the start. The reality is that, firstly, you don't take hostages to secure debts. If you've got a financial crisis at home, for example, you don't start holding your neighbours hostage, do you, until X and Y pay up in that way. So the idea that we're somehow going to excuse Iran's behaviour by saying, oh, no, they acted perfectly well because they were owed the money is just ludicrous and nonsensical. And secondly, of course, there were problems with paying the money. Iran's been sanctioned internationally for the last 13, 14 years because of various infractions. And you can't simply give them money. If you do, you're aiding and abetting a terrorist regime, essentially. And we still don't quite know how the British government has gotten the money, but they claim that it's been done in a way that does not flout those sanctions. Very unclear how that's happened, but there were very obvious logistical problems about handing over that amount of money to a terrorist regime.
And moral questions, Scarlett Maguire, as well. I mean, that 400 million, I mean, there's a lot of money, £500 million that now could be, even as we speak, being spent on Iran's illegal nuclear programme, for instance.
Yeah, look, this £400 million was I mean, because of the international court, we had to sort of put it in escrow. So it's been sitting there waiting to find out. I, like everybody else, had no idea how the deal was done. But given there was a deal, why did it take 5 years? That's what I'm saying. I am not excusing Iran at all. I think it's a terrible regime. I think the way they treated her and the other, frankly, hostages were appalling. I do not think that... But what she was talking about was that somebody said, "Are you grateful?" And she said, "No, I should have been let out much faster." And I think that's right. I think we had a duty of care. She was a British citizen, and we should have got her out faster.
Alan, can we just expand this out a little bit to I suppose it's a little bit of media navel-gazing, but it will seem to some people sometimes that there is an inclination on the part of the great British media to sometimes overlook or minimise the role played by the perpetrator in this. I mean, I'm rather making your point for you that you've already made, but I see it not just in the context of this story, but often lots of stories. We've got if you take an Islamist terror attack, for instance, people are very quick, not always to blame the perpetrator, but talk about failings in MI5's intelligence gathering or the PREVENT programme, or whatever else it is, rather than pointing to the perpetrator. And that's one example. And I think, this might be another example of people looking at this story and not seeing the wood for the trees, and not seeing the fact that at the end of the day, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was held by the Iranian regime, a vile regime that is a stranger to democracy.
Yes, I mean, I think here's the key problem. We do have a tendency to ignore the fact that bad people do bad things, bad regimes do bad things. We've got a similar example happening right now in Russia, Ukraine. We all find some perfectly normally sensible people suggesting, well, actually, he was provoked, Putin. The West and NATO gradually moved their borders closer towards him. But again, there are ways. If you have a problem with a certain issue or with a set of issues, there are ways of resolving them, and we are all, we have an international system. We have ways and mechanisms that you can resolve those things without resorting to violence or indeed to illegal activity. And unfortunately, when those things happen, not enough focus is put on the perpetrators, the people who are breaking and flouting the laws, and instead we're somehow told that it's the victim's fault, or if not the victim, the bystanders, they're the ones who are to blame, rather than the person who's actually gone and committed the crime, as it were.
Scarlett Maguire, one final thought on this. I mentioned the media navel-gazing, but we ought to reflect on the fact that the reason we're having this conversation is because this couple, maybe advised by the Foreign Office or others, have decided to come before the cameras, hold a press conference. They could have enriched themselves. They could have held back their story, sold serialisation rights to a Sunday newspaper. They would have been then bombarded by journalistic inquiries that might have made it that bit harder to get on with their lives. But they are to be applauded, are they not, for choosing this media strategy to be open about things in a press conference for everyone?
Yes, I think they are. I think it's also a very clever media strategy of saying, here I am, these are the questions I can answer. I don't want to talk about the dark thoughts that kept me going. I mean, she did quite reasonably deflect some of the awfulness. She didn't want to talk about the awfulness of being on her own. And then she goes, and now can you leave us alone? Because we need to get back to our family. And I hope that that's what we let her do, is that wherever they go and live, that they are just left alone to try and sort themselves out. Because, listening to the tales of people who've been taken hostage in all sorts of ways, it takes years. And there's that little girl in the middle of it all.
Scarlett Maguire, Alan Mendoza, thanks both very much indeed. More from Scarlett throughout the course of the rest of the day. Now, after the break, as the government deadline approaches for P&O Ferries, we're going to be talking to our reporter Ellie Costello, who's got the latest on a 5 o'clock announcement for you. But first, we'll have a look at the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGibbon. Smashing afternoon out there for most of us, and it's going to stay that way until at least the end of the weekend. Blue skies, feeling warm, odd shower possible, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Generally speaking, high pressure to the east of the UK is maintaining a warm and dry feed of air from the continent, and as a result, virtually cloud-free skies. Not entirely as we go through the evening. Some medium-level cloud drifts north. That could give the odd shower for North Wales, North Midlands, Northern England, for example. Either way, it disappears by the end of the night, and under extensive clear skies, a few fog patches start to form into northeast England, eastern England as well. Temperatures dipping away as well. I think a few degrees above freezing for towns and cities, perhaps just dipping below in some sheltered spots. So chill in the air first thing tomorrow, but plenty of blue skies and sunshine, even where we've got the fog first thing. That disappears very quickly. And then for the vast majority, another dry day. Just the chance of a shower there for the far north of Scotland as temperatures rise, perhaps for eastern England as well, and widely from the north of Scotland to the south of England, we're looking at 15 to 18, perhaps 19 Celsius. A bit breezier for the likes of Cornwall, a bit more cloud here as well through the day. But for most, through Thursday early hours, it's clear skies once again. A bit more cloud coming into the west of Scotland, a few showers here. But away from that cloud, under the clear skies, again, one or two fog patches. But for most, it's a bright, if rather chilly start to Thursday. The sun soon warms things up again, though, and for Thursday, countrywide, it's looking like another spectacular day. Northern and Western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland perhaps seeing a bit more cloud at times through Thursday, Friday and into Saturday. But for the rest of the country, sunshine prevails.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Well, last week, to some public fury, P&O Ferries sacked 800 staff pretty much without warning, effective immediately in a move described as, well, disappointing, to put it mildly, by the government. The business secretary has issued a request for more details surrounding the circumstances of those mass redundancies, so to establish whether any laws have been broken. According to the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union, the agency workers hired to replace P&O Ferries crews in Dover are being paid what amounts to £1.81p an hour. The union says the low pay is, quote, a shocking exploitation and a betrayal of those who have been sacked. Let's turn to our South East of England reporter, Ellie Costello, who's got more on this story and is outside the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Ellie, welcome to you. There was talk of a 5 o'clock deadline. I'm not sure necessarily what was that was for. Perhaps you can explain, and if it's likely to be met.
Well, hi, Colin. I can actually hear the bells of Westminster Abbey chiming there, and the clock is ticking down on this government deadline here. But as so far, it looks like it's going to be met with silence. We're now in the last 5 minutes, actually, before P&O are due to give answers to the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, on why they sacked 800 people via Zoom, effective immediately last Thursday. And as you say, there are reports from unionists that they have been replaced by cheap foreign agency labour in Dover. Indian seafarers reportedly earning as little as £1.81 per hour. And today, Colin, is also the 6th consecutive day of cancellations for P&O Ferries. This is not in their interest either. It's reportedly costing them over £1 million a day to have their ferries docked up and not going anywhere. there. They wanted those ferries back on the seas today. That hasn't happened. It now looks like it could be towards the end of the week, but it is in their interest to get things moving and to get this matter resolved. But so far, our understanding is there is silence to the Business Secretary's calls for answers. And of course, this came from his letter to the CEO of P&O Ferries, Peter Hebblethwaite, on Friday. And Colin, it was a very strongly worded letter, let's just say that. In it, he outlined the government's anger and disappointment over the way that the company had handled the redundancies. He also made a point that P&O had benefited greatly from the furlough scheme. They'd been given millions of pounds by the British taxpayer. And Kwasi Kwarteng says it's a shame that the company doesn't seem willing to abide by the rules that we have put in place to protect British workers. Well, he then went on to ask the CEO of P&O Ferries 10 questions. In it, he asks for the exact number of staff that they have fired, whether they were given any consultation whatsoever, what options were considered before this route was chosen, and if there were other options, why were they rejected? And he also asks if there are plans similar to these for other UK-based staff. And Kwasi Kwarteng makes it very clear that any similar action should not be considered. He wanted answers to those questions on his desk by 5 p.m. today. It doesn't look as though that has happened. I do have a contact inside the Department for Business who says they're not even sure they're going to get an answer today. Well, Colin, what happens when those answers do come back, if at all? Well, the Business Minister, Paul Scully, has warned that P&O could face prosecution if they are considered to have broken the law. That is the notification law, where if a company is going to sack more than 100 people, they have to let the Secretary of State know. Otherwise, they could face criminal sanctions and an unlimited fine. So we are expecting P&O to give a response at some point. They're now 2 minutes away from that allotted deadline. But as I just said, Colin, it might look like it could just be met with silence.
Well, we'll see if that changes in the next few minutes. Ellie Costello, thanks very much indeed. Scarlett Maguire alongside me, digesting that story and spitting out the bits, I imagine.
It is astounding. They did everything wrong. They did everything wrong, and they're now suffering the consequences that anybody could have foretold them. I mean, if you break English employment law, if you treat your staff as though they're absolutely nothing, then other people are going to not use your ferries. I mean, it is a disaster for them, an absolute disaster. They're going to lose far more money.
And some people will say no business is under an obligation just to pay people when the business is losing money. But actually, this is strategic interest stuff, isn't it? These are ferries that import food, that allow people to move to our country, and tourists, etc., cars going to the continent. This is what they call in economic circles a strategic industry.
Well, I mean, certainly, instead of just informing the government what they were going to do and the government allowing it to happen, one would have expected negotiations. One would certainly have expected negotiations with the union to just see where they could go. Awful.
Scarlett, for now, thanks very much indeed. It's 5 o'clock. Coming up live at 5, they said a post-Brexit trade deal with the US was a pipe dream, but as American tariffs on British steel look set to disappear, is the biggest trade deal of them all now within touching distance. Nigel Farage will join me here in the studio. Also, as Scottish teachers self-isolate and schools north of the border begin to close, Neil Oliver will tell me how the SNP government is letting down a generation of Scots kids. And why we should avoid the inevitable comparisons with Princess Diana. A veteran palace watcher tells me how Kate, Duchess of Cambridge, is ploughing her own royal furrow now. Alongside me throughout the next hour, the commentator Scarlett Maguire. But first, the headlines with Ray.
It's 5, I'm Ray Addison in the GB newsroom. Ukraine's president has issued more dire warnings about the deteriorating situation in his country. 300,000 people trapped in the occupied city of Kherson are said to be running out of food and medical supplies, and Russian forces are being accused of blocking humanitarian corridors and preventing supplies from reaching the city of Mariupol. Addressing the Italian parliament via video link, President Volodymyr Zelensky urged Western countries to increase sanctions against Moscow.
Support more sanctions against Russia. Support a full embargo on trade, starting with oil. Support a ban against Russian ships arriving to your ports, so they get to pay the price for their aggression and the mining of the sea. There should be no exceptions of the sanctions for any Russian bank.
Because he understands
President Zelensky. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is calling for an end to what he's described as an absurd war, saying the conflict is going nowhere fast.
This war is unwinnable. Sooner or later, it will have to move from the battlefield to the peace table. And that is inevitable. The only question is, how many more lives must be lost? How many more bombs must fall? How many Mariupols must be destroyed? How many more Ukrainians and Russians will be killed before everyone realizes that this war has no winners, only losers?
United Nations Secretary-General. Jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has been sentenced to 9 years in a maximum security prison after being convicted in Russia of large-scale fraud. Navalny is one of President Putin's most prominent critics. He's already serving a 2.5-year sentence for parole violations related to charges that he says are fabricated. Boris Johnson's spokesperson has accused Vladimir Putin of using trumped-up charges against those seeking to hold him to account. The court in the murder trial of Sir David Amess has been told the accused threatened to kill 4 more people after attacking the MP. The jury was also shown CCTV footage of Ali Harbi Ali walking with a long coat and a black backpack as he made the trek from his home in North London to Leigh-on-Sea in Essex in October of last year. The court previously heard that he'd spent years researching a number of potential high-profile political targets. Those included Michael Gove, Dominic Raab and Sir Keir Starmer. He's denied preparing terrorist acts and murder. A 22-year-old man has appeared in court charged with murdering Sabita Thanwani. The 19-year-old died at student accommodation in Clerkenwell in central London in the early hours of Saturday morning. Tunisian national Maher Marouf, of no fixed address, has also been accused of attacking a police officer. He's been remanded in custody until Thursday. The neighbours of a 17-month-old girl who died after a dog attack at her home have spoken of their shock. Residents in the Blackbrook area of St Helens have described Bella Ray Birch as a beautiful little girl. The dog had only been with the family a week. It's since been put down. Merseyside police are appealing for witnesses and anyone who has any information on the dog.
Ray has lost her life in the most unimaginably terrible circumstances. Detailed investigations are continuing into this tragic event. Forensic examinations to determine the dog's breed are ongoing, and we are working to identify all the previous owners of the dog so we can establish its history.
And the number of COVID patients in Scotland's hospitals has reached a record high for the second day in a row. Official figures show that 2,221 people are currently in hospital with the virus. 12,000 new cases and 37 deaths were also reported. It comes as other parts of the UK experience a surge in cases, with Wales and England seeing a sharp increase. The Chancellor has released an image looking ahead to the spring statement. In a tweet, Rishi Sunak said he will deliver greater economic security and accelerate growth and productivity. Business groups are calling on the government to increase support to help them to manage runaway energy costs. The spring statement is due to start at 12:30 tomorrow afternoon, and you can watch it here live on GB News. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's get back to Brazier.
Well, how is the government's plan to recruit more police officers getting on? A survey of officers who train new recruits has painted, well, a pretty damning picture of a new and frankly pretty hopeless generation, a cohort of trainee officers. Listen, for instance, to the words of this supervisor. We are supporting student officers who can't pass the fitness test, get anxious talking to the public, can't speak to people on the telephone, literally run away from any physical violence, usually leaving their tutor at risk, and even one who knocked on the door to speak to a victim but then ran away before it was answered, leaving his tutor scratching his head. Well, in some forces, a fifth of those who start training now never qualify, which amounts to a considerable waste of taxpayers' money. The research by the Police Federation includes accounts of parents calling senior officers to ask for their trainee police officer children to be given the day off for their birthday. Joining me now, a former senior officer who has previously expressed strong doubts about the ability of new police recruits to do the job we expect them to do. That is former Detective Chief Superintendent from the Metro... No, not from the Met, Parm Sandhu. Parm, thanks.
It was from the Met.
Parm, where did you serve? Forgive me.
It was in the Metropolitan Police in London.
You were in the Met.
So you were right.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's fashionable, isn't it, in certain circles, to knock new police recruits. They're all graduates. That's no good. But actually, the police force that we have, just as with the media, reflect the society from which they are drawn, how they could do no other.
When I first read this report and read the comments of the supervisors, if it wasn't so serious, I would have laughed at it, because some of the instances quoted are just comical. But this is a serious issue because, as you say, there's a lot of money that is invested in these new people who are then trained and then being expected to walk the streets and look after society. The questions I would be asking is, how are they recruited? Are they being given the right information, and are they being asked the right questions? Recruitment and training has to change because policing has changed. In the past, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was a different sort of policing. Now there is a lot more online harm. There's child sexual exploitation, harassment. There's a lot more family breakdowns and mental health issues. So 20 or 30 years ago, police officers were not dealing with that. So the training has to change. But this isn't about the training. This is about recruitment.
Yeah, people will get that. People will absolutely see that the whole online realm has introduced a new area of police enforcement and law breaking, which hitherto wasn't there. But there are some, surely, eternal truths of policing. We had Kevin Hurley on in the last hour, and he said, look, it's about expectations, about managing expectations. If you're going to become a police officer, you need to have a reasonable expectation that now and again you can't be prevented. You're not going to spend your life, at least as a recruit, doing that online stuff. There's a strong possibility you will come face to face with some really nasty people that the public need protecting from, and that may involve you getting your head kicked in.
Absolutely, and that's where we've got to look at what are the questions being asked at that recruitment interview. What is the information pack that these individuals are being given? Does it say you have to work nights, and you have to work the weekends, and you have to work on your birthday? Because if it doesn't, that's what needs to be looked at. This is a huge waste of money and resources. And I did read the report that some forces, the attrition rate is 19%. And that to me shows that there's been a failure in the actual recruitment side of it.
Paul,
so that has to be looked at.
In your day? I mean, when you went to police college, wherever you get trained, how many dropouts proportionate? Would nobody drop out? Was it a handful? Could you sort of see, well, they're not going to make it? How did it work?
There's always been dropouts, and even when I joined, a number of the people that were in my class did drop out, and that's got to be expected. But it wasn't anything like the figures that we're looking at today. And in relation to, there was a different type of recruitment, because when you were recruited 20, 30 years ago, you'd get a home visit. So police officers from your local borough would come to your home, speak to your parents and say, he's not going to get his birthday off, you know. He'd be lucky if he gets his wedding day off. And they would actually vet your home. So there's a difference in how people are recruited, and that's where the money saving in the recruitment side of it is now being wasted on these people being trained.
Are we being a little bit unkind on the people who are behind this, in the sense that we're trying to recruit, what is it, an extra 20,000 police officers? There is a labour crunch at the moment. There is, you know, and it's not just the police who are struggling to get the right recruits. It might be true in the armed forces. It may be true in all kinds of walks of life, in nursing, in teaching. And actually, it's just a fact of life. You've got to accept now that you've got a cohort of young people whose skills are sought after by recruitment, by employers who don't have all the choice they once had.
I'm actually currently supporting 2 probationary officers, and there are some fantastic young people who are joining the police service. So let's not forget that there are some really good people. But unfortunately, the actual recruitment campaigns need to be looked at to stop wasting this money, to make sure that those people are supported when they join and that they're the right people who are joining. But yeah, there is a recruitment. There are shortages of the right people. And 20,000 is a big number to try and recruit in a very short period of time.
Palm Sandu, really appreciate your insights this afternoon. Thanks ever so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Scarlett Maguire alongside me. Policing is changing, isn't it? I mean, the online stuff. But you can't join the police force and say, actually, can I just do the online stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's always been true. But I also, I remember years ago talking to a police federation person who was inundated with, I mean, particularly young white men saying, I haven't been recruited and I should have been, and you've left me for a woman or for an ethnic minority. And he said, actually, what we don't want are big bruisers. What we want are people who actually are interested in conflict resolution.
But there's a role occasionally for the big bruisers. You don't want 2 5'4" police officers when it kicks off outside your local pub, because people get hurt and it escalates.
Yeah, but Colin, that's what. So what are you saying?
I'm saying policing is necessarily physical at times.
Yes, but it's what sort of physical, isn't it? I mean, what you want is a police officer. I mean, this is clearly not the problem at the moment. Is police officers who don't lose their temper, even though we've seen, terrible stories of vicious stuff going on. But actually, I mean, in a way, you sort of wonder how much this just plays into a narrative of sort of young snowflakes, and how much actually out of the people who do it, there must be some really, really good people. And we've always had people who don't want to work and slack.
Scarlett, no, we're not conjuring to mind. No, okay.
Nope.
We'll park that. Scarlett, no, thanks very much. No, this time yesterday, around about this time yesterday, we were bringing you the story of the Boeing 737 air crash in China. It claimed 132 lives. I spoke to a retired air accident investigation official who said he'd not seen a plane behave in the way this one did as it nosedived from level flight at 29,000 feet, hitting the ground almost vertically at 350 miles per hour. Today, friends and relatives began arriving at the crash site, and the Indian government said it would be putting 737 jets operated by various Indian airlines under what it described as close surveillance. We'll run the footage of the plane's final moments again, with the qualification that some viewers may find some of the footage distressing. And as we do that, let's turn to Captain Martin Chalk, a former BA pilot and the General Secretary of BALPA, the British Airline Pilots Association, the union for pilots, in other words. Thanks so much for your time. We always have to caveat these conversations with the usual qualifications. No black box recovered, or at least the content's not discussed yet. So there's a lot of speculation, but I always think it's necessary speculation. People do worry when they see stories like this, and they want to know what the answers might be.
Well, the worry is misplaced. That one of the most secure things we do in our lives is climb on board any aeroplane operated by virtually any airline anywhere in the world. It's one of the safest activities we undertake at any point. So the worry is misplaced, and the speculation is also unhelpful. It is extremely rare for the sort of speculation that comes out at this point after an accident to be any way accurate. So it actually doesn't help. It doesn't help those where our hearts are at the moment, with those that have suffered, the families and friends of those who have suffered. It doesn't help those potential victims of the future avoid becoming victims. And it certainly doesn't help the industry recover from what is a tragic event.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that through, Martin. I mean, if we think back to the 737 MAX planes, I mean, you're the expert in this. I'm just a layperson, but there were two crashes involving the 737 MAX that led to, I think, a global moratorium on further flights from the 737 MAX. And there was a technical problem. Again, you'll understand this far better than I will. Had there not been coverage about those crashes, and coverage is really hard to do, let me tell you, just by barely reporting the facts, the handful of facts that you have at any one time. Speculation is part of the warp and the weft of how we cover these stories. Because if you and I don't do it, other people will. It's just human nature. Why does a plane fall out of the sky and nosedive from 29,000 feet? I think it's a legitimate question.
It's a legitimate question that will be answered now by the air accident investigation authorities in China. They will work with the manufacturer, the engine manufacturer, the manufacturer of the avionics suite that the airplane was using, and all of that expertise will be brought together with all of the information that they can recover from the crash site. The black boxes, so-called, they're actually a day-glow colour in order that they're much more easily found. But those, along with any other information from air traffic control or eyewitnesses, they piece all of that together and very carefully and with a lot of training, thought, experience, they will then come to realistic and well-based conclusions as to what might have been led to such a tragedy. And actually, at this stage, nobody can tell you what is likely to have happened. Anybody who tries to is making it up.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, Martin, I've never found a shortage of former airline pilots and other people who've worked in air accident investigation to come on and speculate. They do it, I think, sensitively, and they do it always heavily qualifying and caveating what they say. I mean, I just wonder, I totally understand your absolutely rational point that people, I hope, will agree with, which is what we shouldn't feed is the irrational fear of flying. I mean, it's, I always labour the point, I'm sure you've spent your life doing so, that it is pretty much the safest way per mile of travelling imaginable. But inevitably, there is always going to be public interest when something like this happens. And I maintain, I think there is a case for honestly, rigorously, and with an open mind, wondering why something as violent as this has happened without being sensationalist about it.
Yes, in fact, it is safer occasion by occasion than taking a bath. So one of the reasons that it has become that way is because the airline industry, the aviation industry, the wider industry, has taken a very safety-first view. And I guess in part that is because when an aircraft, a civil airliner crashes, then there are lots of people affected all at the same time. And that's something that is newsworthy. It's also true that 1,800 or so people a year die on Britain's roads alone. If you multiply that up across the world, there are significantly more people perish on our roads across the world than ever do anywhere near an aircraft. And so because they tend to be 1, 2, 3, 4 at a time rather than much larger numbers, they don't get the same media exposure. But maybe if what we're concerned about is saving people's lives, we should produce the media exposure for the lessons we can learn on our roads rather than the lessons we can learn from this crash. Yeah. Although I have to say I have a lot of confidence that the Chinese authorities will learn the lessons from this accident, and we will, all of us across the world, then benefit from them.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope they show a talent for transparency, which the Chinese Communist Party haven't always shown. Martin Chalk, thanks very much indeed. Scarlett Maguire alongside me now. Here's my problem with the kind of wait until the authorities deal with it, then we'll tell you, the old chap, is that actually nobody will give a toss in 3 months. And that's why you have to deal with the story now. Otherwise, it gets forgotten about.
Also, I think it's really important that I think you're absolutely right, that we have to know, we have to begin to work out what happened, because otherwise there are too many people saying air safety is fine. I mean, actually, because of the arguments about roads, road safety in Britain is much, much safer over the last 10 years. Far fewer people die. There used to be a jumbo jet.
I do a lot more stories about smart motorways than I do about planes falling out of the sky.
Precisely. And trains. Trains, please. I mean, in the last few decades in Britain, wonderful. But I think we have to know. I mean, 600 people, hundreds of people died yesterday.
132.
132. I mean, we have to know for them, we have to know the answer.
Yeah, I'm hearing a producer say suspected deaths, but I think we can say with conviction, sadly, they're likely to be confirmed, aren't they? Coming up on today's show, the doctor who was banned from giving so-called reverse abortion tablets to mothers who decided they wanted to keep their babies. First, a look at the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Smashing afternoon out there for most of us, and it's going to stay that way until at least the end of the weekend. Blue skies, feeling warm, odd shower possible, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Generally speaking, high pressure to the east of the UK is maintaining a warm and dry feed of air from the continent, and as a result, virtually cloud-free skies. Not entirely as we go through the evening. Some medium-level cloud drifts north. That could give the odd shower for North Wales, North Midlands, Northern England, for example. Either way, it disappears by the end of the night, and under extensive clear skies, a few fog patches start to form into northeast England, eastern England as well. Temperatures dipping away as well, I think a few degrees above freezing for towns and cities, perhaps just dipping below in some sheltered spots. So chill in the air first thing tomorrow, but plenty of blue skies and sunshine, even where we've got the fog first thing. That disappears very quickly. And then for the vast majority, another dry day. Just the chance of a shower there for the far north of Scotland as temperatures rise, perhaps for eastern England as well, and widely from the north of Scotland to the south of England, we're looking at 15 to 18, perhaps 19 Celsius. A bit breezier for the likes of Cornwall, a bit more cloud here as well through the day. But for most, through Thursday early hours, it's clear skies once again. A bit more cloud coming into the west of Scotland, a few showers here. But away from that cloud, under the clear skies, again, one or two fog patches. But for most, it's a bright, if rather chilly start to Thursday. The sun soon warms things up again, though, and for Thursday, countrywide, it's looking like another spectacular day. Northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, perhaps seeing a bit more cloud at times through Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday. But for the rest of the country, sunshine prevails.
Join me, Nana Akweer, on Fridays, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons here on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as my panel and I take on some of the top stories hitting the headlines.
You can look up the statistics.
No, you look it up. I hug everyone we learn from it and try and move on. That's it. Opinion is at the heart of the show. It's a place for open and frank conversation, but without the fear of cancellation. So join me here on GB News on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons between 4 and 6 p.m.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Now, a doctor who claims he can help reverse abortions for women who change their minds says he will continue to offer his controversial treatment after he was cleared by an investigation by the General Medical Council. Speaking in his first television interview, Dr. Dermot Carney claims to have helped save the lives of 32 babies after prescribing progesterone to women after they regretted taking an abortion pill. But with the treatment not approved on the NHS, there are serious questions over its efficacy. Alice Porter has this report.
For Amrita, it's hard to imagine life without her baby. But there was a time when she didn't want to go through with the pregnancy.
We had barely any money between us and, it just wasn't the right time at all, not even close. Definitely it was never planned for me and him to have a child.
Because Amrita's pregnancy occurred during the pandemic, 2 abortion pills were able to be sent to her in the post after just 1 telephone consultation.
How quickly after taking the abortion pill did you regret it?
Instantly after taking the pill, I regretted it. I just cried. I called BPAS and I said to him, I regret taking the pill, the first pill, and I was in panic. So I was like, is there anything that I can do? And then she was really calm and she just said, oh, that's absolutely fine, a lot of girls do. She said, if you don't bleed in the next 24 hours, then it should be fine. But I was like, okay, I can't leave it to, it might be fine.
Desperate, Amrita found Dr. Carney online. Him and a colleague have prescribed progesterone to 65 women who want to reverse the abortion process.
If she takes mifepristone, changes her mind, and then manages to promptly get progesterone rescue treatment, reversal treatment, we can improve that survival rate of a baby from 20-25% up to 50-55%. Why, if they're so convinced or so determined to have an abortion, why 6 hours later, 24 hours later, 48 hours later, why would they change their mind? And I think the answer to that is because of the inadequacy of any sort of supportive or counselling services. We know from all of the women that I counselled they tell me that nobody spoke to them.
But Dr. Carney's treatment is not endorsed by a number of organisations who declined our interview requests, including the Faculty of Sexual and Reproductive Healthcare, who say they do not support prescribing progesterone in an attempt to stop a medical abortion, and that abortion reversal treatments are not based on scientific evidence. An abortion provider made a complaint to the GMC against Dr. Carney, accusing him of inappropriately prescribing a treatment with no evidence base and imposing his anti-abortion Catholic views on others. After an investigation, he was cleared of all charges. But whatever your views on abortion, this case raises fundamental questions about the support available to women who change their mind during the abortion process. While debate may continue over the efficacy of taking progesterone to stop abortions, for Amrita, there's no doubt over the difference it's made to her life.
It was only a few months after he gave me the pill that he was banned from giving out the pill. So if I were to have fallen pregnant a few months after, I would not be here with her most likely.
Alice Porter, GB News.
We were just telling you, weren't we, with our reporter, our correspondent Ellie Costello, who's covering the P&O Ferries story, those 800 staff who were let go by P&O Ferries. And the government said P&O need to write to us. They set a deadline of 5 o'clock, half an hour ago, for them to explain why they behaved in the way they did. We can confirm, our friends at the Press Association confirm for us, that a spokesman for the Business Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, has said the government has received a letter from P&O in response to his requests by that 5 o'clock deadline. Ellie Costello was wondering whether the letter had been sent. It has been. Its contents not known to us at this stage. More on that as and when we know more. Coming up, some Scottish schools have closed again because of COVID-related staff shortages and concern over rising infection rates. Will the cycle ever end? First, we'll bring the latest news headlines with Ray.
Thanks, Colin. It's 5:31. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Ukraine's president has issued more dire warnings about the deteriorating situation in his country. 300,000 people trapped in the occupied city of Kherson are said to be running out of food and medical supplies. Russian forces are being accused of blocking humanitarian corridors and preventing supplies from reaching the city of Mariupol. Jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny has been sentenced to 9 years in a maximum security prison in Russia for large-scale fraud. Navalny is one of President Putin's most prominent critics. He's already serving a 2.5-year sentence for parole violations relating to charges that he says are fabricated. The court in the murder trial of Sir David Amess has been told the accused threatened to kill 4 more people after attacking the MP. The jury was also shown CCTV footage of Ali Harbi Ali's journey to Sir David's constituency in Essex in October last year. The defendant has denied preparing terrorist acts and murder. The number of COVID patients in Scotland's hospitals has reached a record high for the second day in a row. Official figures show that 2,221 people are currently in hospital with the virus. Almost 12,000 new cases and 37 deaths were also reported. It comes as other parts of the UK see a surge in cases. And the Chancellor has posted an image on Twitter looking ahead to the spring statement. With 24 pages spread out across a table, Rishi Sunak has promised to deliver greater economic security and accelerate growth and productivity. The spring statement is due to start at 12:30 tomorrow afternoon. You can watch it here live on GB News. Well, we're online on TV and on DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Brazier will be back in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Pretty stark illustration this week of the gap that seems to be opening up between England and Scotland when it comes to COVID. In England, the legal requirement to self-isolate has been dropped, but the SNP in Holyrood insisting that it ought to remain for now. One consequence of that, schools are beginning to close again in parts of Scotland as teachers say they can't come lawfully into work. It's true that infection rates are high. Well, they're high actually in England right now, but they're certainly high north of the border, with anything up to 1 in 14 people currently with COVID, according to the ONS figures. But as recent figures have shown, although hospitalisations are now rising, death rates have remained broadly flat. Certainly nothing like modelling from the early days of COVID suggested it could climb to. So, do school children in Scotland face missing lessons unnecessarily? Well, I'm joined by GB News presenter Neil Oliver, who has some strong views on this. Neil, hi to you.
Hello.
What's happening in these schools? I mean, clearly there is a clinical sea change at work. There is, I mean, COVID is rife in England, it's rife in Scotland, but hospitalisations and fatalities are nothing like what that would have meant once.
No, I think you alluded to the situation correctly in your opening remarks there. That it's a situation that we're going to be in here as long as this testing programme continues, which is becoming, it's becoming increasingly Kafkaesque. Insofar as, I mean, we're hearing anecdotally about teachers who are well. You know, they're not ill. They have what you would maybe have previously described as a cold, which they would quite happily and quite easily be able to work through and work with and come to school and attend class without, any particular threat to themselves or to anybody else. But the regulations mean that they, to abide by the law, but abide by the rules, they have to self-isolate, and they need to self-isolate for a longer period than I think was the case down south. They need to provide 2 negative lateral flow tests in a row before they can return to the classroom. And so we're locked into a situation where teachers who aren't ill in the terms that you and I would understand illness, but they have to stay away from the classroom, and that's putting pressure on the rotas at schools, and schools are either closing or they're getting closer to the necessity to close because the teachers just aren't there.
Neil, you call it Kafkaesque. I would certainly say it feels there's a smack of dogmatism about it. And around about this time yesterday, we had a guest talking about the terms of the public inquiry, the COVID inquiry, and how the word children, I think it's mentioned once, and within the terms of reference for the COVID inquiry, children don't feature. The impact of COVID and lockdown on children just does not feature. It's all about the clinical implications. And, that's obviously massively important and incredibly complicated. But it's a reflection sometimes, it seems to me, it seems to others, of how when we look at the impact of COVID, when we look at the impact of lockdown, the dramatic impact on children, who in terms of fatalities weren't affected in the way that older folk were, but in terms of their development, in terms of how they learned to speak by watching people whose mouths were shrouded in masks, by missing out on classroom time, struggling to get hold of online lessons, a profound impact. And that's ongoing now in Scotland.
I couldn't feel more strongly about it. I'm a dad. I've got, I've got my 2 boys are still at school. My daughter's at university now, but she came through a lot of the restrictions, lived through a lot of the lockdown. I think what this says fundamentally, or what it's about fundamentally, is a lack of care about children at the fundamental level. There's no doubting that children, and you might say in the UK, Scottish children, for particular reasons, have borne the brunt of the stresses of lockdown, without a shadow of a doubt. They've had their educations disrupted, they've had their educations curtailed. The lockdown, the isolation has put measurable, devastating effects on mental health, not able to socialise, not able to just enjoy their lives. And it was unnecessary because children were not in the main at risk from the illness. Even Delta and earlier variations of it did not pose the threat to them, and yet despite that, they have taken the brunt of the pressure of lockdown and everything that went with it. And what the SNP-led government here is doing is showing a disregard for children. They're not caring for children. And I think that is absolutely unforgivable. And the consequences of that basal level disregard for the well-being of children will have its impacts resonating through Scotland and Scottish society for years to come.
Neil, I've got Scarlett Maguire with me. I think she's listening to what we're talking about and wants to throw her two penneth in.
I completely agree that children are the most important. That we haven't thought through, and this was in, frankly, England, Wales and Scotland, right from the beginning, what closing schools means. But what strikes me is how uncreative the Scottish teachers, education authority are being, because actually you do not want teachers going in to teach children when they've got COVID, not because they're ill, but also because the children then catch COVID and go back to the parents and wreak havoc in the families. But actually there are creative ways of doing it, and that's what all 4 nations in Britain should have been putting their heads around in 2020, not sort of still muddling through it in 2022.
I would come back on that and say that it's not wreaking havoc. This latest variant of COVID is, you can find it if you test for it. That's what I mean by Kafkaesque, but it doesn't pose a threat. Colin mentioned a few minutes ago that the death rates are not up, the illness rates are not up. And what we're doing here basically is continuously testing for a cold, and teachers coming into school with a cold and children catching cold perhaps from the teachers and taking that home. There are no figures that you can point to that would suggest that that is wreaking havoc on anyone, even if they are being infected with it. The solution to this is to stop testing. If the authorities keep looking for this cold, they will continue to find it. And it will not go away. And the net effect of that is on children's mental health, their education. If you weigh up the balance, if you put it all in the balance, what ought to be done if there's genuine care for the well-being of children, the education of the next generation, the teachers that I am aware of, and I live in a relatively small town, so we hear about teachers. There are plenty of teachers who are very frustrated by the fact that they are having to test, they're coming back with positive results, they're perfectly well, they don't have any symptoms that anybody would be worried about, but in order to abide by the rules, they have to stay away from school, and they are very frustrated about the impact that they know that they are once again having on children. After 2 years, this will go on forever if we keep testing for a cold in this way, and no havoc is being wreaked at home, in schools, or anywhere else.
Scarlett, she was drawing breath there.
Can I say, right, I am really trying to agree with you, what I'm saying. I mean, I cannot help but think of a woman I know who is in hospital with sepsis because she got COVID from her school children. There are a lot of vulnerable families, and that's why I'm saying we have to be creative about keeping children in school, but actually trying to not let, somehow try and get them not to catch COVID. I mean, I just think to be ideological on one side or the other doesn't work. There are families who seem to have a choice of either sending their children to school and it threatens them, or you keep them at home. And I just think we need to look after everybody. But I think what's happening at the moment is no thought is going into keeping children at school.
Neil, can you wrap it up in 20 seconds?
I think you're aiming there in the context of COVID for some sort of utopia, some kind of ultimately unachievable zero COVID. If it's not COVID, there will always, we are animals. We share life and space and breath and vapour together. There will always be ways in which, in a communal situation, for example, like a classroom, that infections of one sort or another will be passed, and there may well be consequences for that. But the only way that we can successfully look after children, educate children, and keep the mental health and well-being of children where we want it to be is to let children and teachers mix. There will always be consequences. We do not live in a sterile world. And from time to time, people will catch things from one another. This Omicron variant of COVID is, I don't think, this is my opinion, a reason to keep teachers off and contemplate sending children at home back to their bedrooms to look at screens for another unspecified period of time. That's just how I feel as a dad.
Neil, always good to talk to you. Neil Oliver there. Thanks very much indeed for your time. And if you want some more of Neil's opinions, you'll find them online. Many hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, have enjoyed them there on YouTube, on our website. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are currently undertaking an official overseas visit. Wills and Kate have been carrying out engagements in Belize as part of their Caribbean royal tour to mark the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. However, despite this, the Queen has been at risk of being removed as head of state in Jamaica as local politicians plan to push ahead with turning the country into a republic as early as August. Let's turn to the royal commentator, Rafe Hadel-Mancu, who can reflect on this for us. Rafe, I wonder if there is a sense of resignation in palace circles that there will be a number of nations, and we've already seen it start to happen in the Caribbean, of people who see the punctuation mark of the transition from the Queen to King Charles III as the moment that they look at their constitutional settlement.
Yes, well, you have to remember this is just the latest stage in a long process that's happened since the end of the Second World War. The Commonwealth has over 50 nations in it. Only 15 of them are still Commonwealth realms. And the monarchy has always said that it is a decision up to the people of those nations whether or not they wish to remain with the monarchy. And the monarchy has facilitated the transition peacefully. The Queen herself, or in the case of Jamaica, for example, when it became an independent country, Princess Margaret, her sister, came for those independence ceremonies. So the monarchy have never stood in the way of any of this, and certainly I think there is an idea that when the crown does pass on to King Charles, that this will become a live issue in many countries. It's a shame, in many ways, but it's unsurprising that Jamaica has tied this discussion into reparations for slavery, and agitators and politicians are linking the monarchy with racism, and it's really part of this problem that we're seeing in the UK and the US spreading to the Caribbean in schools, critical race theory, and a general teaching of anti-British, anti-imperial teaching. No real positive teaching about civic institutions. People are growing up in these countries, as in this country too, without ever learning properly about the value of constitutional monarchy, or indeed learning about the remarkably modern anti-racist attitudes that were held by people like Queen Victoria, by Edward VII. Instead, we get these false accusations of slavery and colonialism.
Rafe, we've got time for one more question. Anybody looking, and apologies for those listeners on radio, but anybody looking at you today will see you are a man of some sartorial talents. Can we just reflect on the impact of the Duchess of Cambridge? We've cut some pictures showing her in some of the best frocks that she was wearing in Belize. I mean, it's hard not to be. If you're a headline writer for a mid-market newspaper, it is hard not to draw parallels with Diana, Princess of Wales. There is a sense in which she is becoming the ace in the pack for the palace in terms of engaging the interests of the royal reporters and photographers that, at some expense to their editors, go along on these royal tours. That they are coming into their own, the Cambridges, it seems.
They are, absolutely. There was a great hope when Meghan Markle married into the royal family that you would have this great duo with Meghan Markle with her biracial ancestry able to reach parts of the Caribbean and Africa and the Commonwealth and re-engage with the monarchy. That didn't quite work out, but Kate seems to be fully capable of doing that job all on her own. There is a dynamism there. Monarchy needs to be refreshed. The beauty of the monarchy when Queen Elizabeth acceded to the throne was that she was so young, and she brought that new flavour of a new Elizabethan age. And I really think that the Cambridges are showing that the monarchy is a fresh institution, that the monarchy evolves every decade or so. We get a slight change, so it respects its traditions, but shows a modern face. And I think we can be very proud that we have in the Cambridges worthy successor to the Queen.
Rafe Hadel-Mancu. Rafe, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. Now, America is set to... This is a good news story, by the way, so prick up your ears. America is set to abandon its 25% tariff on British steel as ministers pin their hopes on striking a trade deal before the next election. International Trade Secretary Anne-Marie Trevelyan declared last night that there had definitely been a change of approach from Joe Biden, who put talks on the back burner when he entered the White House, as you'll remember. Former President Donald Trump imposed the tariffs in 2018, but it looks like the UK government has negotiated a significant win for the British steel sector. The UK will subsequently drop retaliatory tariffs on American brands, sort of things we're talking about. The Harley-Davidson, for instance. Well, Nigel Farage is alongside me here in the studio. Fancy a Harley-Davidson?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind one. Maybe getting a bit on in years for it, but hey, look, I mean, it's obviously a good news story, but remember, Trump put those tariffs on in 2018, not just for the United Kingdom, but for the European Union, and we were still part, of course, of that orbit. So that was what happened. Yes, it's good. It follows on from whiskey. There was a whiskey-bourbon swap that happened a few months ago. So we have incrementally been going in the right direction. And remember, we are still the biggest foreign investor in the USA, and the USA is still the biggest foreign investor in the United Kingdom. So it makes sense to get rid of many of these barriers. The problem really comes with financial services, and that's where there are quite big barriers to British insurance companies, financial services companies operating effectively in America. And so it's a good news story, but there is a tragedy. You know, I was in Trump Tower on the 11th of November, 2016, just after the election, and there was real excitement in the room. We're going to be, January, in the Oval Office. Within 90 days, we want a free trade deal with the UK because the UK has now left the EU. We're not protectionist, but we want free trade deals that are fair deals. And of course, because the Conservatives in office made such a botch of Brexit, they should have simply triggered Article 50 immediately. We wouldn't have had 3.5 years of agony. So 4 years of Trump, after we'd voted Brexit, and we did not get that comprehensive trade deal done. And I think we'll look back on that in years to come as a really big wasted opportunity.
And just in terms of the comprehensive trade deal, when is a trade deal not a trade deal? Because there is an argument, you mentioned whiskey, there is an argument that you actually can do it piecemeal. You do financial services, you do steel, you do farming, and one by one. And actually at the end of it, you've got a trade deal.
I mean, look, you're absolutely right. Rather than spending, as the EU did with Canada, 7 years negotiating.
Tying up all the loose...
Yeah, that's right. It could have been done bit by bit. Obviously, in the end, agriculture is always the most difficult one for all trade deals between countries around the world. But look, we're going in the right direction. And I think overall, if you think about it, we've managed actually on our own. We're doing deals with Australia, other countries like that. We are heading in the right direction. That part of Brexit is going okay. Domestically, you can argue really now is the time to cash in the Brexit dividend. And tomorrow, to see Rishi standing up with the spring statement saying we are going to cut back on EU regulation. I'd love to see it.
You mentioned agriculture. I was on a Zoom call a couple of weeks ago with a dozen farmers who are really genuinely worried about food security. And they point to trade deals with New Zealand and Australia and the fact that they will see, for instance, sales of lamb massively undercut by cheaper imports from Australia and New Zealand. The big daddy of them all, of course, is an America trade deal. If you're a British farmer, and I've got farming friends who consider themselves Brexiteers, but aren't happy with the settlement as they currently see things, and they're petrified about what an American trade deal might mean.
Yes, they are. You're absolutely right. And perhaps that's why the government is tacking in a different direction. Whether it's rewilding, whether it's the whole series of environmental schemes that are being put into place, the British government is actually preparing British farming in a way for what might come with big global trade deals. However, that conversation you had with those farmers may have changed completely because don't forget, 80% of our sunflower oil comes from Ukraine. Vast amounts of global wheat come from Ukraine. So actually, what we may be thinking about in the future is getting food wherever we can.
Well, or just producing more from our own land.
That would be nice.
50% of our food comes from the UK.
That would be nice. But don't forget, in 2 world wars, U-boat campaigns, in 1917...
they were growing potatoes in the gardens of Buckingham Palace then.
But in 1917, we came close to perhaps even losing the war because we've never, ever been self-sufficient in food. Simple as.
Nigel, thanks very much indeed. Much more from Nigel from 7 o'clock, of course, and more news coming up. Do stand by.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. Smashing afternoon out there for most of us, and it's going to stay that way until at least the end of the weekend. Blue skies, feeling warm, odd shower possible, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Generally speaking, high pressure to the east of the UK is maintaining a warm and dry feed of air from the continent, and as a result, virtually cloud-free skies. Not entirely as we go through the evening. Some medium-level cloud drifts north. That could give the odd shower for North Wales, North Midlands, Northern England, for example. Either way, it disappears by the end of the night, and under extensive clear skies, a few fog patches start to form into northeast England, eastern England as well. Temperatures dipping away as well. I think a few degrees above freezing for towns and cities, perhaps just dipping below in some sheltered spots. So chill in the air first thing tomorrow, but plenty of blue skies and sunshine, even where we've got the fog first thing. That disappears very quickly. And then for the vast majority, another dry day. Just the chance of a shower there for the far north of Scotland as temperatures rise, perhaps for eastern England as well, and widely from the north of Scotland to the south of England, we're looking at 15 to 18, perhaps 19 Celsius. A bit breezier for the likes of Cornwall, a bit more cloud here as well through the day. But for most, through Thursday early hours, it's clear skies once again. A bit more cloud coming into the west of Scotland, a few showers here. But away from that cloud, under the clear skies, again, one or two fog patches. But for most, it's a bright, if rather chilly start to Thursday. The sun soon warms things up again, though, and for Thursday, countrywide, it's looking like another spectacular day. Northern and western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, perhaps seeing a bit more cloud at times through Thursday, Friday, and into Saturday. But for the rest of the country, sunshine prevails.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are